Good morning and welcome to our guest Mirna Smidt, and thanks for having accepted our invitation, Mirna.
Hi, Elena. Great to see you. Great to be here. Looking forward to hear what we dive into.
Yes. So before entering in our conversation, in our interview, just 2 words about our community. It is a business holistic community for women, entrepreneurs, managers, and other people who works in the environment of business. We are focused both on business, but also on the person itself. So we are really focused also on well-being and psychology. That's why you are here with us today. And related to Mirna, before she will tell us about herself, she is a coach, a trainer, a facilitator, also a TEDx speaker. But she has a previous life, I would say, and she will tell us about her previous life. So, Mirna, our first question, it is related to your first and your previous life. So what were you doing and why have you changed from being an engineer to a positive psychology trainer?
Oh, wow, that's a big one. But yeah, I worked as an engineer at Cisco, so network engineer in one specific, fairly narrow and deep technology in global team, working mainly virtual with different partners, sometimes customers, but more like partners and internally to retransfer the knowledge, kind of the expertise in this technology. And the technology itself was a very new one. So there was a lot of this kind of need to support different teams with it and so on. So I kind of stepped into the training though while I was still studying. So throughout this career as an engineer, there was always a bit of, mix of a bit of a both. And I think one part of what was really the guiding principle and value and passion in my previous career in engineering was always learning. And the fact that it was such a new technology and steep learning curve and a lot of knowledge transfer, that was something that was really exciting for me. So I would say more like I didn't necessarily do the huge shift where I was doing one thing and then move to something completely else. It's more that I was kind of growing 2 passions at the same time. And then at some point, they started developing in different directions, let's put it that way. And in that moment, I kind of chose to stay with one and kind of put more myself into training, basically. So at Cisco in engineering, I spent 10 years. I loved my career. There was a lot of exciting things about it. I loved the team. I loved the company. I loved the company culture, also freedom of location that I had for most of my career. But then in training, there was always an element that I was missing more of in engineering, which was this also just learning about myself and my skills and also my well-being, but also different aspects of my self-development and working with others on their self-development. That was always a huge passion, always something that was integrated also in my previous career as we were kind of fresh team. There were a lot of opportunities for mentoring, for coaching, for transferring the knowledge, but it was also always kind of a side project and a hobby and everything in one. And I kept being more and more hungry for that, to learn more. And then as I would be learning more, to transfer that knowledge and to help others to learn it faster than reading the million tons of books and going to all possible courses to kind of make it more effective. So even today in learning, I'm very passionate about making it effective, about making it, to the point for what person really needs and kind of finding new perspectives that each unique person I work with is kind of a little bit lacking to round up their set of skills or their set of well-being.
So it's really impressive. It's really impressive even because I know Cisco very well because it was a competition of our company. So I know that it's really an amazing company. It's of course a huge company. I mean, it's a completely different path that you have decided towards because from a huge company to your company. So this passage, how it has been, I mean, I can imagine maybe it's a very big change in a certain way. So how did it leave you? I mean, in the sense, how did you pass a tough period or it has been easy? So can you tell us about this change of perspective and also of life?
Absolutely, sure. So for me, it felt like a very positive change. I can recognize that probably it took some courage in the background, but at the moment it didn't feel like a courage because I was very clear of where I want to go, and that's the only path. And in engineering, while I loved the place where I was, I did feel like wherever it could go further would be less fun and less interesting and less inspiring. Because among other things, because I was so mature in technology, I was working and the technology got very mature. So my path ahead could have been or towards management, which in corporate was never appealing to me at all, as my first value in life is freedom. So
we know it.
yeah, plugging into that structure was not really appealing. Plus, also the second thing that I really care about is this personal development and development of others. And I feel while that should be part of manager's role in a corporation, I feel like that's very small part of how they actually spend the time. So that was always kind of not that appealing. And what happened with the technology I was in is that learning diminished so much because initially it was so intense and so new and always changes to technology. By the time I was leaving, it was very settled, yet I was very deep in it. So I could have stayed there, kind of, couch potato of an engineer style, retransferring the new thing, but not necessarily growing, or shift into completely new technology, which would be kind of a lot of steps back and starting from the beginning. And I think it would require a lot of passion and energy, which I kind of had, but I had much more of it for training. So in a way, I was very clear that I wasn't clear where the training path will take me, but I was clear that where the Cisco path is taking me further is a little bit downhill. So I was like, then I better run downhill and get onto the next one. So in a way, because of this clarity, and you could argue that this maybe even means that I stayed there too long, but there were many things that I didn't want to let go, including the freedom of location, really nice team, and so on. But you could argue that maybe I already got so mature into it that even though I still love the place a lot, I felt like it's very clear that it's time to move on, like it's next step, it's next phase. So that did not make the transition scary. I think if I did it earlier, maybe it would be more scary. The second thing that was easy, I had a lot of experience in training already, because for already 11 years, I finished the trainer course 11 years earlier. Throughout my career, I worked a lot on developing others because the team in which I was grew from 12 to 400 in the meantime, and there were a lot of opportunities to work on that team development. So in transferring knowledge, in design of training, in design of workshops, in positive psychology as well, because in the meantime, I also graduated from Masters in Positive Psychology. I felt like content-wise knowledge, I had a lot of that and experience and tools, and I was clear what I want to design. But probably the part that was more challenging, or that should have been more challenging, or although I must say it feels more challenging now when I'm doing big cleaning of all the things that grew organically. But the part that in theory should have been the most challenging would be the one of business development. Because even though I had a lot of knowledge of how business works in terms of how to position technology for business, positioning training for business, and talking about it in more pitch problem-oriented way versus beautiful models I have to share with you, that was tough. I mean, in theory, it was clear, but that was tough to get a handle on. And I feel like that's still the weaker side of what I do. And I feel like I'm still much more in flow and always, flourishing when I'm dealing with content design, workshop design, with delivery, with facilitation. And then the business and marketing are more like, yeah, they're okay, but it's not like the passion, to spend a lot of time on that. So I think that was always the kind of the hardest bit of taking that responsibility and learning different approach to these things.
Absolutely, but for sure, everyone has its own place. I mean, we cannot do everything. We are not the best in every field. So if you're good in one thing, maybe you are lacking something in another field. So you need maybe a team that can help you in doing that stuff that it's not yours. I mean, that you are not feeling the flow because you have spoken about the flow, We know what the flow is. A question that arises now because you were saying that you like helping others achieving their goals. So the question is, have you had somebody who has helped you during this changing, the sense that helped you in clarifying your goals, or it happens because you were working already with others, so you had the skills and also the techniques to achieve the thing that you
Yeah.
want to achieve.
I hear you. I didn't really have a formal mentor or kind of a coach throughout. I think there were people who influenced me deeply in right moments, but more like sort of like if you're riding a bike and they give you a push at one point, you know,
Yeah.
and maybe push off when you need it as well, or push in the right direction. So I think that that's a lot. But for me, what was showed to be, like you're saying, I was a huge nerd by the time, and I still am. And I read every book on self-development, and I love the theories, and I love psychology and the tools I had. But the part which really I found most valuable was being surrounded by people who, you know, whose mindset is contagious in a positive way. Maybe people who in some way are more ambitious than me, or maybe people who in some way are even more I'm quite optimistic, but maybe even people who are even more open of what you could build, or people who you could discuss options with when making a decision. So I feel like even I don't have a formal team, and that was a very conscious decision not to have a big team I need to manage, but to free my time to focus on content and delivery, and then kind of minimize the rest and not deal so much with the team development. Maybe that changes in the future, but initially that was the decision. But I do feel there were so many people who at the right time provided me with feedback or input of positive energy. But I must say that in that, I saw even more value of community and kind of network, but more like peer network than necessarily formal programs. Formal programs I used a lot to boost my skills.
Okay.
But that's also maybe because I'm a bit of an introvert, and it's hard for me. I really get good ideas when discussing with others, but then I need to sort them out on my own. So maybe that's a bit of a, but I would say value of communities is something, and getting that right vibe and the right mindset from others, especially because I think when we are surrounded with people who are thinking smaller or more rigid, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just that they're trapped in their image of the world for the moment, that's very contagious. Because if everybody is telling you, I see this, I see limitations, world is a dangerous place, you know, you should play it safe, you shouldn't leave the safe job or whatnot, then everybody tells you that, you feel a bit crazy to think differently. Even I am a bit of a rebel, so not too crazy, but you know, so that was not too difficult. But I did miss, hey, but show me examples of how it can work. You know, show me that there is this path. Not everybody has to believe it, but show me some examples. And I think that was really valuable to see people who think more like that, and to connect more with people who think like that. But I think I was lucky in finding them more through previous events I was doing and my network. I see a big value though in having a community like that. So Perla maybe also can be that place for some people, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. The environment is really important for everyone path. So Mirna is based in Zagreb, where she is now in this moment, but she goes around a lot. I mean, she trains a lot of people all around the world. And so, Mirna, how do you find your customers? This is a question for who would like to do something similar to you. And also, you enter within different type of companies, but we also would like to know if the topics that they requested to be I mean, activated are all the same, or they are different. So there are some teams that are mainstream. What do you see?
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so first on the topic of kind of location and connecting with others. Yeah, for me, when I left Cisco, I knew it was really, really important for me, this both freedom of location and spending time in places that are attractive to me, like Amsterdam, where I used to live. It's one of my favorite places. I like Italy as well. You know, it's some of the places where I really wanted to spend time. So I was a bit intentional about building things more that take me there, but also about building many things in virtual world. And that was 7 years ago, so kind of before COVID, but it was my background as well, right? So, and kind of combining between the two and designing very intentionally, where do I want to spend? But having that said, my work, most of my work today still comes from the network, from recommendations. And I think that has to do with me doing so many projects over the last years, many of them as volunteering, many of them randomly, engaging in many conversations, creating many webinars, sharing many things. And I think that would be a message. If you don't have that network, I think the message wouldn't be where to find them, but the message would be, what can you share and where can you, create some value? And I think today LinkedIn is quite a good place for that. But as that goes, we'll see in a few years, probably it will be a different place. But I think also communities, again, where we actually have chance to engage in a bit more quality way and not just, quick pitches and everybody wants to sell something, but actually connect and reflect, how can I offer some value here? What am I bringing in? I think these are important places. In terms of topics, I do see a bit of shift there. So I work with Happiness Academy on positive psychology topics, and also we train the trainers. So sometimes these two connect a bit, and I work with both with different companies. But let's say on the side of Happiness Academy, on the well-being, I do see a bit of a shift that before COVID, it was a topic that people were very, like, it was taken very broadly. So usually most requests would be something on well-being, maybe on resilience as well, but kind of like this, broad picture. What can we throw in as the well-being thing, into the mix, just to kind of tick the box, we are doing something about it.
Yeah.
So it felt like the market was not developed for that conversation at all. While now in these few short years, there was a big shift where it's almost too noisy, but with a lot of low quality as well of conversation. And one of my biggest pet peeves is that the conversation about well-being is too often positioned like this thing you should add on top. Like, you have your work day and then take an hour for well-being, or, attend a workshop next to your work. But in fact, it should be integrated, and it should be integrated in every daily habits, in the strategy of the company, in the values of the company. That's the only way it will totally make sense. And it will be sustainable even when people are busy, right? Because what is the worst thing to do when people are stressed? Give them an extra day to attend the stress workshop, It's not. On the other hand, of course, there is a role of workshops and educating about the topics. But with that, I work in two ways. One is these short formats, which I would say from companies are more in demand, like webinars, one-time workshop, and so on. From my side, I think that's a format that cannot give a lot of value in terms of actually developing a skill, because you wouldn't expect someone to learn how to write into our workshop or to get fit into our gym,
Impossible.
So yeah, exactly. But I do see that as a really good opportunity to open a new perspective, to offer a new tool, to build a bit of motivation and curiosity, to share some resources which people can pick up on if they're ready to tackle this topic. And then the second format is more in terms of longer courses with short time slots, but over longer period of time, where we can really work kind of on skill development more actively and really engage and really train the skill. Of course, I love the second one much more because I feel like it has more impact. But I think the first one is a bit more in demand more often. And the topics are, apart from well-being, like resilience, engagement, concept of flow, of being really present, really focused in the experience. Sometimes mindfulness. There are companies who hate it and the ones who love it. So that's a bit controversial one. But then positive emotions, maybe. These, I would say, are some of the main topics. But I do see this tendency for companies to get more and more narrow and actually ask for workshop topics like energy management, or something that's a bit more, that before would be smaller bit of a broad topic, which I do feel like it means we are getting a bit deeper into the conversation, but it's still not very deep, to be honest, with most of companies. At least that's how it feels like. We're just tackling it, the superficial, the first steps, just opening this new gate.
Okay, great. So, from your perspective, how is the overall situation of people related to stress nowadays? I mean, we have read that there is a high percentage of people suffering from depression, anxiety, and other psychological disorder. So we would like to know your point of view on this.
Yeah, sure. So I work with people much more on the side of, hey, everything is good, but still it's not good enough. Where can we take it further? But I do encounter also a lot of conversation, especially when working with companies, especially on these two topics, stress and burnout. Depression and anxiety, you can see a lot about it behind the scenes from surveys, from anonymous things, from different well-being questionnaires. But I would say it's not so much part of a conversation in a workshop. I think partially that's because people I work with are kind of more in a place where they're kind of okay with everything, but they feel something is missing. So maybe they don't struggle so much, but a bit different audience. But in the companies, I would say stress is one of the top conversations, and burnout is one of the top of conversations we should have. And I see it's a big buzzword everywhere, but I also feel that within the conversations, when you actually engage with teams, it's not there enough. And I think one of the reasons is because burnout you don't recognize until you're really out there.
Wow.
And then we mention in many ways, oh, I feel a little bit burnout, but often it's just exhaustion or stress or being tired. Because burnout, it's not just about being exhausted, it's also about being highly demotivated, cynical, almost feeling a bit destructive towards the work and the company and so on. So it's kind of step forward. I think what, in my perspective, very subjective, I think what we see much more is tiredness and exhaustion and sort of a saturation with things we are doing, plus stress. These two kind of depending, somebody has more of one, somebody more of the other. And my, again, very subjective perspective is that this has to do with two things. One is boundaries, that with COVID boundaries and with virtual work and with more remote work, that boundaries shifted a bit. And it's much harder to establish boundaries between work and non-work. And that has also advantages that we can be so flexible to take work everywhere and so on. But that is a challenging bit. I've been through that step 12 years ago, moving to virtual. I know the struggle, and I really recognize it in many people, even when they're not aware of it, that that's the root of it. And then the second thing, I think it's also related to this kind of pressure. You know, you should be happy and satisfied, and you have it all, you know, it's a good enough job and, you know, good enough family life, and you take nice vacations occasionally, and why aren't you? And I think this pressure of self-blame that we are not everything is the way it should be in our life, I think that's really the destructive part of this much well-being conversation. Because it's kind of like, hey, we gave you a workshop and still, you know, which doesn't really work like that. But yeah, I would say stress is also one of the most required topics that people ask for. And
Yeah, no, this is great, because a few years ago, no one inside companies were talking about well-being. So this is a very great step forward towards well-being. So, Mirna, related to happiness, because you have founded the Happiness Academy, is a wide subject, of course. Happiness can be everything, more or less, and also can be treated with and achieved with different techniques. You have chosen positive psychology as the main one. So, can you tell us a little bit more about what and how positive psychology tools can help us in improving our happiness?
Sure. Well, I leaned into positive psychology because of my background as an engineer and seeing a lot of training that was very fluffy, we called it, you know, like not practical enough, not based enough on something tangible, but a lot of, you know, invented models that sound beautiful, but in the end, what do you do with them? We have a saying in Train the Trainer world that says, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I really sign up for that. So for me, what attracted me to positive psychology was abundance of data and basically science-based approach, that I can lean into something that at least partially has some science behind it, and that's not a pretty marketing-based model. And the second thing was practicality of it, that in comparison to some earlier directions in psychology, like humanistic psychology, which already talk a lot about people developing and even well-being, but it talked in more philosophical way. And positive psychology leans a lot into kind of metrics and surveys and more research-based methods and so on, and turns data often into practical interventions and tests those interventions, basically tools, different things that we can use in a practical way to work on it. So I love that about positive psychology. The thing I hold against it is we cannot pretend that everything that is science is 100% true for everyone. And I think what I would advise to anyone when looking into their own kind of well-being or happiness or any of these, even resilience, is to look into good frameworks, good models, good tools. I'm always happy to recommend nerdy books that are science-based. Feel free to reach out, you know, on LinkedIn or anywhere and ask. But to lean and look into those frameworks and tools and take them, because they will show you some blind spots and some structures that you can use to explore your well-being. But on the other hand, to also respect these very individualistic needs that we have and recognize that not everything is relevant for everyone, and to really play with experimenting. If I do this change, if I work a little bit on, I don't know, thinking a bit more optimistically, if I look into the concept of flow, as you know, one of my favorite concepts from positive psychology, if I look into that concept, if I play with it a little bit, what will it give me? I shouldn't strive to get more well-being in my life, you know, in measurable way to score 10 on any test. No, I should play. I should look for new ideas. And if I look in positive psychology, that's good because I'll find science-based and practical ideas. But still, all models are wrong, but some are useful. I want to look which of them apply to me, which of them are the blind spot I was neglecting that will actually kind of push me forward.
And this is again amazing because it's really practical and is a science-based approach. So also for people who does not believe in psychology or in well-being approach, this could be a very high value system or technique.
Yeah, and to take that as a framework for own reflection and for own experiments. And I think one more thing that people often get wrong and that blocks them, they stay or in action too much without stopping to evaluate, or in reflection and overthinking too much. And we all know both probably. But I think the right balance between the two, the cycle of me stopping and asking myself, hey, am I happy? Do I feel fulfilled? How is my well-being? Let me look into a new tool. Let me try something out. But then taking that time sometimes, not too much, in a bounded way, and then taking the tool and experimenting with it in my life, acting, committing to it for several months, putting it in practice, seeing feedback from real situations. Does this help me? How can I tweak it that it helps me more? And then again, after a few months of committed action, not overthinking all the time, should I, is there a better way? No, committed action, then stopping and saying, hey, does this work for me? What can I improve? What else can I try? And I think this cycle is really important to establish, that when we are in action, we don't overthink, we don't stop ourselves and not really give ourselves into the experiment because we are overthinking, but also not to get stuck in constant action, jumping into the new things without actually taking time to step back, zoom out to the bigger picture, and then really think and evaluate. Where am I? Where do I want to go? Am I on the right path? What is off and what is working well?
Yes, what you are saying that is really valuable. It recalls me the phrase of Socrates that was saying, you know yourself and you will be happy, because here again, consciousness is on the first step, on the first place, because you are asking yourself a lot of questions that are related to yourself to know you much better than before.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of work for a person.
Absolutely, but it's also dangerous not to get too stuck in that, because if you constantly dissect, am I happy? Am I happy? Am I happy? You know, you're laying on the beach, you're enjoying, everything is wonderful, and you're like, am I happy? I don't know. I kind of am, but I miss a cocktail. You know, you will never feel 100%. You will always find something that you miss. So really good question is also not one that is kind of drilling into all the details, but that asks more, how can I be happier? So it's not, am I happy? You know, that's not an absolute category. Nobody is always 100% happy. But how can I be happier? What can I still improve in my life and well-being? What's next for me? And a wonderful question, what little change or a new habit, if I would make it, would bring me the biggest positive impact on my life or on my well-being or on my work or whatever else, right? What is a small change that influences everything? What is the biggest impact in that small change?
Small change, correct, because people sometimes stopped their path to empower or increase their well-being because they think that they have to make huge steps and the huge changes, and then they stop because they become a little bit too nervous, or they think that they have to be very brave to change, and
it becomes pressure,
too much pressure. And instead, small changes are more benefit, and you can do it. I mean, it's easier, of course. So Mirna, the last two questions before closing our interview.
Tell me.
What about your next projects? So where are you going to be focused? And if somebody would like to start a path with you of empowerment or being more connected, happier lives, so how can they start, or from where they can start from?
Sure, love it, and love that you packed the two questions together, because it's easier for me to start from the second one. Because it leads us to the first one. So in terms of project, there are always many new things. So I think it's also a really good place to connect is on Happiness Academy newsletter, because there weekly I send different stuff and ideas and tools and materials and podcasts and different things that people can learn from. And at the same time there, I'll send updates on different events and so on. So I think that's a really good place to keep in touch. And also if somebody is a trainer or facilitator or looking to shift more in that direction, then also Trainer's Toolbox newsletter is more targeted, not just for positive psychology, but anyone working with workshops. Another place to connect is LinkedIn. I really love like sharing things there and connecting with people. So very welcome to connect, and also to ask any tips for books or specific topics and subtopics, because there is so much under this umbrella of positive psychology. So these are some great places to connect. And in terms of where to start with to work on your kind of journey in well-being, so there are two places with me that are really easy to start, that don't require a lot of commitment and deep work like we talked about. And I think they're really good first steps because they open the vision to what's next. One of them is the workshop that I do fairly regularly that's online, that's called Life Design. And I think you might be familiar with that workshop. It's a workshop where we spend 3 hours just asking some different, it's a structured process of deep and kind of inspiring, but also insightful questions, which we end with you designing the vision for your life and also specific plan, from big picture, 10 years life and so on, to very specific, what's next, what are the immediate next steps. I didn't think this really helps to somebody who doesn't want to just work on their well-being, but their plans in general, to put things in perspective and to find starting point from all the options and all the overwhelm. And then the second one that's more well-being targeted, I prepared on-demand workshop, meaning recordings, short videos in total of 2 hours, that goes through 12 pillars of happiness, the framework that we use for all the courses and trainings on Happiness Academy, that helps you reflect on different aspects of your well-being and what is strong and what could be stronger and what is more relevant for you and what is less relevant. And this workshop is called Take a Leap to Happiness. It's 2 hours on demand, so it can be accessed whenever. And that always, if somebody wants to work on their well-being, I recommend starting with that, because that will help you to actually make your journey really individualized, to really understand, hey, these aspects I don't need to work on, this is a priority, this I should, but not right now, or whatnot. And then after that, all the other projects are quite bigger in scale. So it's different courses that are online through a period of 8 or 10 or 12 weeks with 2 hours each week, where we dive in deeper into specific subtopics like flow, resilience, mindset, which is basically how our thinking influences our well-being, and well-being in general, where we go through all the 12 pillars. This is for somebody who really wants to work actively on their well-being by implementing small habits and learning many tools, and they want to structure and science-based tools and support in that. And then the last one is the getaways, the 1-week immersive events. There are once per year, but hope is from next year, twice per year, which we again take a different topic, beautiful location, and kind of immersive learning event. But for that one, it's the best to stay in touch through newsletter to see what's next. I'm toying with a lot of ideas for topics and locations, but I'll also follow what I see is needed. So that's one also where I'm playing with.
So Mirna, you have plenty of projects ahead, and also still, because I am one of your best fans, I would say, because I have attended more or less all of them, and also the getaway. So I really appreciate your work. For me, it's amazing. So congratulations from my side. So
Thank you so much.
one suggestion from my side, if I can, is the
Mhm.
fact that if you are willing to have 2 getaways on a yearly basis, maybe one can be done in Italy.
It's high on my list. Italy is high on my list. Hopefully for 2025. That would be awesome.
So within our community, we have people who owns beautiful places that maybe can be a good place for your next amazing week together, because it's not only related to, yes, improving yourself, but it's also amazing because you are surrounded by incredible people.
What we talked about the mindset and yeah, influence and ideas. Yeah.
So really great job, Mirna. So thanks a lot for being with us, and looking forward to meeting you again, but lively and within our community.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Have a nice day.
You too.